All right, let's get into it. Today, we're not doing a religious study. Instead, we're diving into this absolutely fascinating system of logic. We're going to crack open a single page of the Talmud to try and solve a legal mystery that has, been twisting minds for centuries. So let's put on our detective hats and see what we can find.
Think of this as a kind of ancient legal thriller. It all kicks off with a simple ritual, but a really strange loophole creates a paradox that seems to completely defy common sense. The mystery is this: how can doing something right, and then undoing it, actually make you more guilty than if you had just done it wrong from the start?
Okay, so to get our heads around this puzzle, we have to know the basic rules of the game first. I want you to imagine we're standing in the ancient temple in Jerusalem. Someone brings what's called a meal offering, which is basically just fine flour. Now, for this offering to be legit, a very specific procedure has to be followed.
It's really just a three-step process, super simple. First, the priest scoops out a symbolic handful, which is called the cometz. Second, that handful gets burned on the altar. Now, this one action is the key that unlocks the entire rest of the offering. And third, once that handful is offered, the shirayim, or the remainder, is now officially permitted for the priests to eat. Sounds straightforward, right?
Okay, so that's how it's supposed to work inside the temple. But our whole mystery really begins when someone illegally performs this ritual outside the temple. And this is where things get really, really weird.
And here it is. This is the paradox. Check this out. On the left, if you take the whole offering and burn it outside without ever separating that special handful, you're exempt. It was never a valid offering to begin with. But look at the right. If you do take the handful, which makes it valid for a split second, and then, and this is the crazy part, you mix it back in and burn the whole thing, you are suddenly liable. So this is our big question. It makes no sense, does it? Performing the key step and then immediately undoing it should just put you right back at square one. But instead, it creates guilt. How is that even possible? This is the exact puzzle that the ancient sages were determined to solve. Now, the sages don't just throw out guesses. They have this incredibly sophisticated legal toolkit. And their investigation brings us to this amazing showdown between two huge principles. Regular common sense logic versus the specific internal logic of the text itself. So the first argument that comes up is probably the one you and I would make. It's the majority rules principle. I mean, the handful is tiny, and the remainder is huge. So when you mix them back together, shouldn't the big part just absorb the little part? The handful should just vanish into the mix, making the whole thing invalid again, and poof, you're exempt. But then this scholar named Rabbi Zira comes in with this brilliant counter-argument. He says, hold on a second. He points to the original text and shows that the root word for burning, the handful, is the same as the one used for the status of the remainder. And he argues, hey, that's not a coincidence. That shared language creates a special legal link, putting them on totally equal footing. So his big point is, just as one valid handful can't legally cancel out another one, the giant remainder can't cancel out the handful either. And boom, that right there is our first major clue in this mystery. The obvious common sense majority rules argument gets shot down by a rule that comes directly from the specific wording of the text. Talmudic logic isn't just about what seems obvious to us. It's its own self-contained system with its own rules, its own axioms. And this whole idea of a unique internal logic gets even crazier when the puzzle gets more complex. What happens with an offering that has not one, but two essential parts? Let's see how this new complication pushes their reasoning to the absolute edge. So in this new scenario, you've got the handful of flour, but you've also got a scoop of frankincense. Both of these things have to be burned on the altar for the offering to be complete. If you only offer one, the priest still can't eat the leftover flour. Which naturally raises a new question. What happens if you illegally offer just one of these two parts outside the temple? And here, you guessed it, our legal experts disagree. The majority of sages say, yep, you're liable. For them, each piece, the handful and the frankincense, is important enough on its own to make you liable. But another scholar, Rabbi Eliezer, he pushes back. He says you're exempt because offering only one part is an incomplete act. Since you need both to get the job done, offering just one does, well, nothing. Legally, it's meaningless. This whole debate between the sages and Rabbi Eliezer just pushes the logic further and further until it leads to one final, incredibly abstract question from Rabbi Yitzḥak. And this is where the investigation goes into a whole other dimension. Rabbi Yitzḥak asks this total mind-bender of a question. Okay, we know offering both the handful and the frankincense makes the entire remainder permitted. But what's the actual legal effect of offering just one of them? Does it do nothing at all, like Rabbi Eliezer thinks? Or does it accomplish something? His question really forces us to look at two competing theories. Theory one is what you could call partial permission. Maybe offering the handful fully permits exactly half of the remainder. It does 50% of the work, so it gets 50% of the result. But theory two is weakened prohibition. Maybe offering one part doesn't permit any of it to be eaten, but it changes its legal status. The prohibition on the whole mixture is just weaker. It's a really subtle but profound difference. So, faced with this incredibly precise puzzle, how in the world do the sages come to a final verdict? What happens next is just this masterful display of logical deduction. The Gemara, which is the text analyzing all this, tries to figure out whose opinion Rabbi Yitzḥak's question even works with. They test it against every known opinion on the books, and they find it doesn't quite fit with any of them. They're trying to reverse engineer the very foundation of the question itself. After all of this rigorous back-and-forth analysis, pushing the logic to its absolute limit, the text lands on this. A single word.
Teiku. It's an Aramaic word that basically means let it stand. It's the Talmud's way of saying we have taken this thing apart from every conceivable angle and we cannot resolve it. The question is so perfectly balanced, so fundamental, that no logical proof can tip the scales one way or the other. It's left unanswered.
And that just leaves us with a final thought to chew on. After this whole intellectual journey, from a simple rule to a paradox, through layers of debate, and ending up at an unanswerable question, you have to wonder. Maybe in this system of thought, the ultimate goal isn't always about getting to the final answer. Maybe the real point is the process itself, the rigorous, the creative, the unending effort to perfect the art of asking the question.